out to our people. I'll send it to you. You can put it on your social media if you want to.
Thank you.
Tell people to watch your great show. It'll be
Live
fun.
show.
Yeah, I think this will be fun. A fun conversation.
Yes. Yes, it will.
We were doing this a couple of weeks ago. I guess at this point, I'm gonna. I'm hearing myself again here, so let me get out of this. Okay, mute that. Okay, so I have the link here. We are live. So I'll put it out here. Send it out to our teachers. I like to send this into this teachers group. They seem to enjoy this sort of thing. So
Yes.
and then we'll put it on the LumaLearn page. So yeah, we were having this discussion a couple weeks ago, and then it was interrupted by technical issues. So hopefully we're not going to have any of those. I was in a different location and I have moved
Oh, good.
halfway
Yeah.
across the country, hopefully for better
Oh,
internet.
wow.
No, that's not the
Awesome.
reason, but
Okay.
that's not the reason I moved, but
Oh, but you did move. Oh,
I did.
cool.
Yes, I was in
Congrats on
Massachusetts.
moving.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I was in Massachusetts and now I am in Minnesota. And Minnesota is kind of home. It has been home the majority of my adult life, so it's it's kind of nice to be back. And
Yes.
so all
Did you
right, so
drive back or did you
no,
fly?
I flew.
Okay.
Yeah. But there will be actually a long cross-country trip coming up. That's kind of the last part of moving. So
Oh, yeah.
the end of the month, there's gonna be a long drive. But
Ah.
after that, hopefully we'll just, there's flurries outside. It's the first snow that I've seen in 5 years. So
Wow.
I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for all this. I'm kind of used to the tropics and enjoying that for the last several years, and now reality has set in that not everybody gets that great weather all the time. So,
Yeah.
I
Wow.
mean, minus the hurricanes, but whatever.
Yes. And that's a
So,
big change for you to move.
oh, for
It's
many
yeah.
reasons. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's so many reasons that life here is different. And the interesting thing is, even if you move from like somewhat comparable countries, I mean, United States, Canada, even with that, there's
Mhm.
shockingly um, big differences in things
Mhm.
that you don't really think about, just like infrastructure, because we kind of we kind of tend to think of Canada as a suburb of the United States, right? Like
Mhm.
it's just a connection to the United States, but it's a completely different government. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's one of those things that's kind of interesting that when we think about living in other places, and you might be a little familiar with that. You go back to Europe and visit your family and
Mhm. Yeah,
kind of see
Romania.
the
Mhm.
yeah, kind of see the differences there. And then you have the shock, the culture shock of, oh my goodness, what do you mean you don't or you do or whatever? Yeah.
Right.
It's,
Yeah. I think it always it's such a beautiful country, but then it always makes me appreciate America even more.
yeah,
So
yeah, for
you're
sure,
yeah.
for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting because I love to travel, and I love Haiti. I love going in different places and getting to know the people, and these places are so beautiful and the people are so wonderful and there's so many great experiences, and I love to live there. But there is really something very special about the United States. So they
Yes.
say that that's nationalist thought. Well, too bad. I guess I'm a nationalist. I think
I
my
don't
country
know.
is the best.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with being proud to be an American, right?
Yeah, no, I don't either. And I think most people are nationalists one way or another, no matter where they're from. Even, my husband's Haitian, he loves Haiti.
Yeah.
It's you just do that. It's your country, that's your land, that's your culture. And I wouldn't accuse him of, oh, you're just a nationalist. No, he's a Haitian who loves his country. It's okay.
Right.
That's totally fine. So,
Right.
all right. Well, let's get into it here. So I've gone ahead and sent out the link to a few people, and it looks like we might have some people here joining us in a little bit, but we can get started in this. So our discussion that we were talking about before is about, and we can kind of just start it from the beginning because we haven't heard from you. You weren't in the last one. And so what do we do when it comes to incorporating these fun, interesting, sometimes nerve-wracking, sometimes even terrifying news stories that are coming around? And this is talking about, right now we're in the political heat in this country, of course. So that's part of this, and I wanted to incorporate that because it's on everybody's minds, and it's definitely coming through. If you're homeschooling and you are even remotely politically aware, or your children are remotely politically aware, meaning you have access to social media, you watch the news, you have a pulse right now, you're going to be aware of, some of the craziness that's happening in this country as far as politics. And so, so do you have any kind of opening advice, any opening thoughts on how you would address that in a homeschool environment or in a classroom environment? And again, keeping it where we're not necessarily taking sides, and we're not saying, you should vote for this person, you should vote for this person, I support XYZ, or I support, not that you shouldn't, of course, as a parent, you should talk about the things that you support and why, and get your kids used to that. But, I think as a teacher, from our perspective, we're a little bit more neutral most of the times, hopefully. And so, how do we address those things and encourage kids to be participants of the social and the political aspects of their culture without feeding into some of the fear and the frenzy?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's definitely a sensitive area. I think that number one thing is to love everyone, right? Whether you're Republican or Democrat, regardless of anything, just love everyone. That's number one, and be kind. But also understand that there are differences in opinions, and people are going to be different than you and think different than you. And so I know that for me, if I was homeschooling my children, I would be basing everything off of God's word and the Bible. And so, therefore, they would see that I am pro-life, right? So I want to protect such a special place as the mother's womb, and I understand that God created each of us in our mother's womb. So that's something that they will learn at a young age in my home, and then as they begin to grow up and see certain things in the world, they'll be able to see maybe the differences between Republicans and Democrats, what they stand for. And it doesn't mean that a president has to be perfect, because no president has been perfect. And so we're not necessarily,
some of them are just better at covering it than others.
Right.
Yes.
And some presidents say silly things. Some presidents speak very well, but then they don't do as much. Some don't speak as well, maybe say things that are offensive, but they actually do more. So it's just a matter of looking up to, what is this president doing for my country and for the future of my children and for me, and also to not look at our president as a spiritual leader, but just pray for our president no matter who that president is. And so I'm saying he right now just because our president is a man, but in the future we don't know if we will have a woman president. And so I really believe that that's where it starts, is in the home and what's being taught in the home. And then the children will be able to see whether what they're seeing in the world is the same as what's going on in the home, or if it's different. And that's an opportunity for parents to share the differences, and to maybe say, why people are acting this way, or maybe they are hurt, or it is out of anger, and it doesn't mean that what they're doing is okay, but this might be why you're seeing these types of things in our world today.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great foundation. That's a great place to start. One of the things that you mentioned was, talking about the biblical basis, and then you also mentioned, thinking that he's not a spiritual leader. I think this is an important thing that we forget a lot when we look at, as Christians. When we look at, and I think a lot of people that watch this are Christians, not necessarily everyone. I hope we have, a diverse viewership here. So we'll kind of try to come from all perspectives. But when you have somebody that's biblically based or spiritually based, and you have the scriptures that tell you the stories. In our case, we go to the Hebraic scriptures, and the tradition there was that the leaders were both spiritual leaders and were also governmental leaders. But there was a definite distinction between the kings and the prophets. So even though David was a man after God's own heart, he was under the spiritual authority of the prophets. And we forget that a lot of times because we look at the good kings and the kings who led them in a spiritual way. But that was because those kings actually were good kings and were spiritually sound and were had their relationship with God in the right place. And so that's where they were going. So they just naturally led in that direction. And then you have somebody like Saul, or you have somebody like Samson, who, you think of Samson, he was an absolute disaster, and yet he remained in the position of a judge for 20 years. I mean, that's a huge amount of time that God allowed him to stay in this position of judge, even though he was, by all accounts, not the leader that you would want to have. I mean, he was not, he wasn't a good guy. And yet God sometimes knows who we need, even if we don't know who we need. And so I think one of the important things is to read through some of the stories of the leaders in the Bible and look at their flaws, look at their faults, but also look at how God used them. And this is not to excuse a leader and say, well, we should vote for somebody that has a lot of flaws because God can still use them. Of course, that's true. I mean, God uses Donald Trump, God used Barack Obama, God used George Bush before that, God used Clinton. God uses, leaders all over the world. He used Fidel Castro. He uses the good and the bad, for his glory. And that's important to have that foundation that, all things work together for the good of those that love God. And so we can have that assurance. And when we have that assurance, I think that helps. But at the same time, to know God allows people to be in power, not necessarily because they are a good person or even because they're a good leader, but they might be exactly what we need at that time. And so number one is really getting our spiritual foundation there. And so prayer for the country, I think, is a great place to start. And again, we may have people that are coming at this from a secular perspective. And whatever that means to you, prayer for the country, I think, and keeping your focus and understanding that this is our country. Whether or not we agree, we share this country. And so we have this camaraderie, whether we want to or not. I mean, you can leave and get citizenship in another place, but so many people come here. And I was talking to my brother-in-law. We were talking about politics. And I mentioned to him, because he was saying, well, this and that and everything else. Well, maybe this is okay. Maybe the system is okay. Well, why don't we try it that way and whatnot? And I said, he's an immigrant from Haiti. And I told him, I said, you immigrated here.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else to go. There really isn't.
Yeah.
If the United States, for some reason, and this is a little bit, maybe sounds a little bit scary, but it's true. If the United States collapses, that's it. From a physical, political play. I mean, that's not it. It's not like that's the end of the world because, things can happen. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But, hypothetically, really, it's the United States that's holding everything together. If the United States falls, what steps in? What comes in to fill that void?
Right. Yeah.
Probably China. And I don't know how up you are on the politics and the social practices in China and whatnot, but it's not the people that I would want to have in charge of things. I mean, that does not sound like a good end game for us. And there's definitely other options. There's many things that we don't know about. It's not just us or China, but right now those are the big ones. Those are the ones that are kind of running the show. But I think that first of all, centering where we are spiritually, and I think that keeping prayer at the center of it is really important. If you are a believer and you believe in the power of prayer, I think before you have discussions on anything like politics, social issues, especially anything that's going to be perhaps a conflict. And there may be homes where mom believes one way and dad believes another way. And I know there's homes like that.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, sit down and say, okay, we don't necessarily agree, but we love each other. We are all Americans, or at least we are living in this country and benefiting from this country, if you are, or from wherever you are, whatever country that happens to be. And we have the best interest of this country. We have the best interest of our fellow citizens in mind, even if we disagree with everything else. So we're going to pray for them. We're going to have genuine concern for them. We're going to love them. We're going to try to disagree with them. And we're going to be honest, not be afraid to say, I am pro-life, or I am, pro whatever it is, or I believe in this and this and this because of where I am in either my spiritual or my moral beliefs,
Yeah.
or
And
other
we
beliefs.
And yes, and I just wanted to add, we find peace in the fact that God is sovereign, right? So God is
Hmm.
sovereign. God was sovereign over President Barack Obama being president. God is sovereign over
Absolutely.
President Donald Trump being
Hmm.
president. And so God is in control, and nothing happens without him allowing, just like you said in the Bible with David and with kings and rulers, and even with what happened with Joseph. And why in the
Right.
moment everyone can just fall into despair, like, wow, how is this happening? But then in the end they see why. And that's the beauty of who God is that
Yes.
Satan has some control of what happens right now, but we know who has the final say. And so
Right.
that's the hope that we as Christians have beyond this life. And that's the hope, because sometimes it can feel hopeless, or it can feel
Hmm.
like we will fall into despair if this person does become president. But that's not the case. And so we
Hmm.
have to remember who is the King of Kings, and that's Jesus. He rules over all. And so we can see that we are imperfect, the presidents are imperfect, but
Hmm.
we know who is perfect. And so that's just something that came to mind as you were speaking. And
Hmm.
thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. And the presidents are a tool.
Yeah.
They are nothing other than that. They are a tool to get the job done. And the interesting thing about this, one of the things that is very commonly said in error, is that the United States is a democracy. It is not a democracy, it's a republic. And there's a huge difference there. And we're of course talking specifically about American politics, but both of us are familiar with other political systems too in other parts of the world. But we are a republic, which means every single one of us are governors. And this was actually a conversation that came up. I was talking to my niece, grown niece. Most of my nieces and nephews are grown. I'm the youngest in the family, so I grew up actually closer to age to many of my nieces and nephews. And she was, trying to say, she was saying, well, I don't know how to vote, and everybody's pushing me to vote one way or another, and that makes me just not want to vote. That's an interesting, and I find, especially in these very heated election cycles like this year, that is the sentiment. I'm hearing a lot of people are expressing it on social media. People are expressing it to my ear, and they're saying, I'm so tired of people telling me you got to do this or you got to do that. If you don't vote this way, you're not a Christian. If you don't vote this way, you're anti-American. If you don't vote this way, you're anti,
Mhm.
whatever, anti-immigrant. If you don't vote this way, you're anti-woman. If it's always one way. You want us to lose our health care. You want us to go to China. I mean, it's all these extreme things. How would you address that as far as from the perspective of voting for, again, thinking about kids in the classroom? Kids that
And
say, I just don't want to vote. I'm not going to vote.
right. So yes, you're going to hear both sides, right? On TV, maybe from your family. Like you said, what if one of your parents is Republican? What if one of them is Democrat? And obviously, you can decide not to vote. But I also think that if a child is older, they are able to look at the differences, right? So
Hmm.
maybe make a checklist of, like, what does this person stand for? What does
Hmm.
this person stand for? And then see which one you are drawn towards. What do you believe? And so I really think it comes down to how you live your life, what you believe, and just your core, your core foundation. And obviously for believers, our God's word is our core foundation, and that's what we
Yeah.
focus on. That's the truth that leads us. That's why we live our lives. That's why we get up in the morning. It's because of that truth that we have, who Jesus is, the hope that we have in him. And so for me personally, I can speak for me personally, and just be honest of the fact that we have to be faithful to what God says. We have to be faithful to God's word and how he convicts us. So he's constantly growing us and we're constantly being sanctified. So a year from now, I'm going to be different than I am now, right? So he's going to be constantly changing me. Maybe there are things in my heart that needs to be changed, for sure there are. And so he's going to be constantly changing us. We're going to think differently, see people differently, hopefully be more loving towards others, be more understanding. And so that's where I can say confidently, and I can say with conviction that I stand for what God says in his word. And for me, God says to protect the human life. God
Mm-hmm.
says, do not murder. And I know that's pretty blunt to talk about nowadays, but it's the truth. I mean, that's
Right.
what God says. He says, do not murder, protect human life, that we were all created in our mother's womb. And I know that some situations are very difficult to understand, and some
Mm-hmm.
situations can be hard, even as Christians, for us to say what is the right thing to do in that type of situation. And there are difficult situations that happen because of sin, but the end result is that we cannot take away life. We cannot
Yeah.
take away a life that has been conceived and come forth, even if it was conceived in sin. And so that's what it comes down to. And we have to obey God's word. That's ultimately what we have to obey. We're going to stand in front of God one day. We're going to have to give an account for our lives. And I just pray that the Holy Spirit continues to lead us, that we continue to follow and obey his word.
Yes, absolutely. That was actually one of the things that I mentioned to my niece
Mhm.
when we were having that conversation. As I said, don't think of everything. There's so many things that people are going to put on you. They're going to talk
Yeah.
about, this person's child, this and that, and this person's spouse, this or that, and this
Yeah.
person's history, and this, a business deal this person did back in the 70s or whatever. They're going to talk about all these things that you're like, I don't care about all this stuff. Why,
Yeah.
why should I vote for this person? And I told her, similar to what you're saying, Christina, is that, it sounds like you are that one issue voter. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Whoever
Mhm.
is going to support this particular issue is the person I'm going to support, because I think that right now this is the most important issue that we have in the United States.
Yeah.
And I am not necessarily that, but I have been that. And I suggested that to my niece. And I think this is good advice to give to kids, especially kids that are coming up and almost to the age of voting, is to let them know you can choose an issue. What is the one issue that you think is the most important issue in the United States right now? And it can be anything. It can be racism. It can be, feminist rights. It can be
Mhm.
media, something or other. I don't know what, I'm trying to think of all the things that kids would would relate to,
Yeah.
censorship. I mean, it could be things like education. That might be, something that would be a major issue for them. What is it that you think is going to be the most important thing and have the longest lasting effects in this country? And then letting them choose, of course, letting them choose, because this is a vote, and they're adults then at that point when they're casting their vote. But having them choose, asking them
Mhm.
to choose what it is that they would consider that one primary pivotal issue, and then leading them to to kind of find the positions of the candidates. And and it's not necessarily just two candidates. It's Democrat, Republican that have dominated, but there are other parties as well. And um, in kind of what you said, and I can't remember exactly what it was that you said, but it kind of led me to this. 4 years ago, my opinion on our current president was completely different than what it is now.
Mhm.
And my own way of thinking about things, my spiritual way of thinking of things, none of that really changed. It was just over the process of the last 4 years, I saw evidence. I saw things that happened, and that made me think one way or another about this particular president.
Mhm.
And but I have never believed, and I know some people will greatly disagree with me, and that's completely fine, but I've never believed that you should vote for the lesser of the two evils. I never
Mhm.
believed that we should be voting for someone because the other person is worse. I just don't think that's, I mean, there's a certain point, if this person is pure evil, then yes, perhaps you want to vote for someone else just, you know, to get them out of there. But that's not an issue, because what comes in usually is something even worse. And if you look historically at that, when people have fought to get rid of somebody at all costs, many times, I mean, think of revolutions. So many revolutions have led to just horrible dictatorships.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not even going to start naming them, because people will be, will get me on some of the historical facts, because I'm not necessarily well versed on all of them. But I'm thinking about in Haiti, the Duvaliers, they came in, and it was kind of a revolutionary push. It was more of a social revolutionary push, that they came in and everybody was so convinced that they were going to get rid of the bad, right? And then it happened again then later. And this happens all the time, is that when you vote against someone, you end up not paying attention to who's taking their place, and you end up getting somebody even worse than them. So I would say, know who it is that you're voting for, and know who it is you're voting against, and make sure that you are actually voting for this person's policies and against that person's policies, because you are doing both. By casting your vote, you're accepting this and you're denying this. But yeah, so one of the things I wanted to mention is this actually kind of follows into a recent video that went up. The owner of LumaLearn and her friend Kelly. So Tina is the owner of LumaLearn, and Kelly is her friend. And they have some videos that they put up on this a show that they do on this channel, that is Homeschool How To, and they've been homeschooling for they have adult there. They have, I think Kelly has almost adult. She has older teenage kids, and then Tina has one son who's an adult and another one who's almost there. And so they've done this from kindergarten, pre-kindergarten. They've been going the whole way. And they put up a video just this last week that was talking about debate. And I'm not sure if you saw that, but that's a really interesting video. And the way to get kids interested in really discussing these and working out these issues. And sometimes kids are not interested at all, and you don't want to push them into it if they're not. But this can be a really great way, a really practical way, if you as a parent do not really feel like you are equipped to walk them through kind of this tough world of politics. I mean, it's messy. It's a messy world. And so there's other places out there as well. So I recommend you watch that video.
Okay.
It's like a 10-minute video. And for anybody who's watching us that maybe is in the same place and says, I don't know, how to get my kids to start thinking about these things and that kind of critical thinking sort of thing, perhaps get them into something like debate clubs, where they learn those active skills of debate and learn how, and what they do is they take on social issues and they take on political issues. And so it's very relevant to what's happening right now. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's a fantastic skill to learn and a great resource for homeschool kids. So I just wanted to mention that, because I think that kind of ties into what we were doing here. So do you have anything else that you want to add to the discussion that we're having right here? I have a couple more questions that we can go through.
I just wanted to say really quick to what we were talking about previous to you sharing about that 10-minute video. So if we vote for a president because of one specific decision that the president is standing for, for example, like pro-life or whatever it is, I think as believers, we should vote for the candidate that comes closest to God's word. So usually if the president is pro-life, a lot of his other decisions go along with pro-life, right? Come closer to God's word. And so that's ultimately what I want to say at the end of it all, is that we need to vote for whichever president is closest to God's truth.
And an interesting thing with that too is look at the people that surround him. And I'll just put this up. This is maybe a little bit partisan. That's fine. People look at Donald Trump and say that man does not reflect a Christian life. And I can look at that and say, yep, I see it. I can completely agree with that. And so there's a lot of people that, the never Trumpers, that say can't vote for him because the man is just, he makes me feel icky when I watch his video, the videos of him, when I read his tweets, when I know what I know about his life. He's not the kind of person that I want to support. That's a valid argument. Look at the people that are around him. And then look at the people that are around Joe Biden, and look at the people that are around George Jorgensen. And to be fair, I don't really know a whole lot about what's going on in the Libertarian Party. I haven't put as much emphasis on that. I'm kind of looking at the front runners. But when you are looking at Donald Trump and you look at the people around him, he has people around him who are undeniably followers of Jesus. And I mean, looking at his most recent, what is it? Where is she right now? His nomination, that's not nomination. What do they call it for the Supreme Court? His Supreme Court pick, but what do they call it? She has been, when he picks her and says, this is the person I want, now she's in the middle of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what that's called? I don't know.
Supreme Court. I don't know.
It's the nomination, yeah? Yeah, because she's been nominated and then she has to be confirmed. Okay.
Yes.
So that's what it is. She's the nominee. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, what do they call it?
I don't want to say if I don't know. I'm like,
exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even looking at her, she's very clearly somebody who lives her faith.
Right.
And and that's one of those things, you have the Protestant versus Catholic versus, I've seen people, Catholics are not Christians, and and those kinds of things. So I don't really care. The point is the woman lives what she believes. She does. She consistently lives it. And what's amazing to me about her, this video is not about her, but I think she's a phenomenal woman from what I've seen, is not only does she live what she believes, but she is unashamed in her belief on it, but still is able to say, I can look at the evidence of something and say whether or not the law says because she's an interpreter of the law. She's not a maker of the law. And she understands that. And I think that's an important thing, because some people want judges to be makers of the law. And she's not taking that role. She's not taking that position. And so I think she's a great example. And, looking at Pence, look at Pence and look at his life. That man has, from what I see, a very solid Christian belief. He's just a very simple, solid Christian. I don't know a ton about him, but you might complain about Donald Trump, as do I, and as do many people, and I can understand. And I'm not saying that you should vote for him or shouldn't vote for him. I'm just saying, as far as the evidence goes, look at the people that are around him, and then look at Joe Biden and look at the people that are around him. Well, if you're watching the news at all right now, that's not looking too good for him. I mean, who does he have supporting him? Who does he have as his vice president? Who does he have? Who does he have changing parties from the Republicans and saying, we're going to vote for this guy? As from that perspective, you kind of have to say, Trump might have a lot of flaws, but he has people around him who are very strong spiritually, who are very strong ethically, who are very strong morally, who are very honest people, and they might help keep him in check. Yeah, his tweets drive me nuts. They do. But I look at the people around him, and I look at the people around Biden.
Yes. And sometimes as he's real. He's real. He says what he thinks. And usually we're not used to that. We're not used to a conservative president,
right,
who, we're used to something that's, written out, that looks very professional, very well worded. And he's very real. Right. So that's one thing that I do like about him. Some of his tweets, I don't agree with 100%, but he's real. He's real. And it is what he's also, we have to look at his willingness. Is he willing to hear these people out who are pastors, who are praying for him, Franklin Graham. Franklin Graham is around him. And in regards to Judge Amy Coney Barrett, she stands for our Constitution, and that's what our country has been built on. And that's huge. So yeah.
So that's, and again, it's not necessarily to sway some, people one way or the other. I mean, I clearly have made my decision but I still, there's still questions that I have, and I still wonder,
Yeah.
what's going to happen. But ultimately, I know how the story ends because I've read Revelation. And so I know how it's all going to end at the end. Um, there's going to be, um, things are going to fall apart. At some point, they're going to fall apart. That's what's going to happen. But this was one thing that I kind of lost my train of thought when we kind of got on some other stuff. But I wanted to mention one of the things that I mentioned to my niece is that when the first commandment that we were given in the Bible was to take care of the earth, right? To have dominion over the earth. And we think of that as kind of a, tend the garden and keep everything nice and green and, and take care of the globe. And that's great. And that's true. We are supposed to be environmentalists. We are supposed to care, we're supposed to recycle. We're supposed to compost. We're supposed to, have a garden and feed our families. We're supposed to do that sort of thing. And that's great. But it also means the social aspects. We are to have dominion as human beings. We are given dominion over all aspects of this earth, and that means the social, that means the political, that means the laws, that means all of these aspects of it. And so, while and I was telling her at the same time, as Americans, we are not given the option to vote. We are given the obligation to vote, because as a republic, we are all governors. We are all born into a system in which we are all governors. That's the whole point of a republic, is that the people are the ones who govern. And so it is our duty to vote, as opposed to a democracy where it is mob mentality. The majority believes XYZ, which would just be horrible for something like white supremacy or any kind of supremacy, because if they are the majority, they simply eliminate the others. And that's the unfortunate thing about, people just falling into this idea that democracy is the way to go. Well, no, I tend to disagree, because that gives you mob mentality. The republic is the idea that we are all governors and we all deserve to have our voice heard. But more than that, we all are responsible to serve in the government, at least in the way that we vote. And that was enough for her to say, okay, I'll vote. So she was, she was all ready to go. At first she was like, nah, I'm not going to do anything, because her father is very, you got to vote, you got to do this, and you need to vote for this person. And, and she's like, I have no idea. I don't know. I'm not going to just take it from him because he said it. And she wants to think for herself. But I just said the three things that I said: you are in the republic. That means you have the duty. As an American, you have a duty to vote. You are created by God. And the first commandment that we were given as images, or as beings made in God's image, is that we were to subdue and have dominion over the earth, and that includes political and social issues. And the last thing the other thing I told her was, find that one issue that you really think is the most important. Don't worry about the rest. Just find that one and figure out where the different people stand. Because if you try to figure out everything, you're not going to find it. Just find the one, pray about it, have peace about it, and say, okay, this is who I'm going to vote for, because on this particular issue, this is what they believe. On this particular issue, this is what the other people believe. And then make your decision. And then don't worry about it. Pray about it and say, it's not the end of the world if I voted for the wrong person.
Yeah.
I changed my vote from last time to this time. I've completely changed my opinion. So, it happens. We can change our opinion, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you can say, I changed my opinion. I stood up in front of my university class last year when I was in Haiti, and I said, I can't stand this person. I can't stand this person, and these are the reasons why, and gave the whole list. And at that point, that was the first time that I really felt like my only option was third party. Because I didn't feel like I could defend either one. And only in the last few months has my opinion changed. So, feel free to change your mind. It's okay. It's not the end of the world either way. Ultimately, God has control, but he does use us to make things work. And the most important thing is prayer. So, okay. So the completely changing our direction now. I have a question here. And I tried to put it down kind of in the way that I heard it, but I kind of did this in shorthand a little bit. So we've got a lot of new people. This is basically from the perspective of somebody who has just started homeschooling. They were in the public school. They were super active. They're not necessarily really involved in a church that has an active youth group. I know that's where a lot of socialization comes from with homeschooled kids. how can you actively meet people, and where are you going to find friends as a homeschooler? So completely different topic, but this is one I wanted to bring up and see if you have any thoughts on that.
Mhm. Yes. Well, obviously, like you said, it would be the local church. So that's one of the, but you said that their church specifically does not have a youth group. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like they have like an active youth group,
Hmm. Hmm.
or one that's very big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from my experience, for example, I'm from Romania where I live. There's a really big Romanian community. And so even if one specific church doesn't have a big youth group, someone who goes to
Hmm.
a different church, and, you're able to go to that youth group, even though you don't go to that specific church. Or a lot of times, if the families go to different churches, they'll reach out to someone, like they did with me, for example. And so they asked me to lead their girls in a Bible study. Just
Hmm.
they've heard my testimony, and they asked me to do that, just to share God's word and to share my testimony, just with, especially with everything their girls are seeing nowadays, on social media and all of that. I also think that social media is a great place to start, because there are so many Facebook groups. There are the Nextdoor apps that you can ask for. I don't know if you have Nextdoor app where you live. Um,
I'm no idea.
yeah, so it's just an app that you're able to find people in your community with common interests, and so that's
Hmm.
something that you're able to use that app specifically for, is to ask around, hey, is anybody else homeschooling, or does anybody
Hmm.
know of a Christian organization who helps with homeschool youth, things like that. So you're able to use social media to your advantage, and then ultimately pray about it. If you are trying everything, and let's say one day you go to the park and you see some people there that you never met before, but you hear how the mom talks to the children, and you talk to the mom, and then all of a sudden you have that connection. And it doesn't have to be on the internet, but it can be in person.
Hmm.
God will open a door in his timing. And so you can try all these different avenues, and if it's not working, just do your best, but
Hmm.
then pray and ask God for opportunities of going to the park or going somewhere where
Hmm.
you may meet somebody that you may be able to connect with.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that terrifies me is the idea that, with social media being so accessible. So with that, definitely the caveat of, be very careful. And,
Yes.
kids should be working with their parents on that sort of thing. If you're going to meet if you're going to meet someone, your parents should know.
Yeah.
And do, you know what? I am the kind of person that if I'm going to meet somebody and my kids are going to go hang out with them, I'm going to ask those parents to
Right.
exchange background checks,
Yeah.
because I don't know who you are. And you
Right.
haven't necessarily, even if it's and this is in any situation, um, they are your kids. If the parents of their friends are, well, and your kids are going to be mad at you for asking, that's kind of just to be expected. But you are supposed to take care of them, and there is so much craziness in this world, and it's
Hmm.
not necessarily new craziness, but there's more accessible craziness because of
Right.
social media and whatnot. You've got to protect your kids, and do not be afraid of your kids being mad at you. Do
Yeah.
not.
Right.
It is better for you, and you don't even have to talk to your kids about it. Just say, all right, no problem, I'm going to meet with the parents. And
Hmm.
when you meet with the parents, just say, you know what? I understand you want to keep your kids safe. We want to keep our kids safe. We don't know you. We think you're wonderful people. You have made it to this point, but we would like to run a background check on you. I mean, if my, and this is, I'm talking about if my kids are going to go spend the night at somebody's house, if my kids are going to
Right.
go on a day trip, or you go to,
Right.
something, or what, I would absolutely ask for that. You have access to it now. It doesn't necessarily bring up everything. It doesn't necessarily bring up if there's maybe somebody living in that household that, doesn't have a record but does have some shady behavior. So, it's not going to catch everything, but I think don't be afraid of taking the precautions as a parent. Don't,
Yeah.
because you are going to be much more comfortable with the parent who says, yes, absolutely, thank you for asking. I'm on that, and thank you for offering your own background check, because you're
Right.
saying, we have nothing to hide. This is us. This is who we are. This is, our information. We want to present it to you so that you are completely, um, confident, that's the word,
Mhm.
that, this is what's going on in our house and whatnot.
Yeah.
And also, if your kids are going out with anyone else, get them a cell phone. If they do not have a cell phone, even if they're young, if they're going to meet people, if they're going to youth group, I used to be like, kids shouldn't have a cell phone until they were XYZ years old. But now I believe kids should have a cell phone because they need to be able to call for help. They
Right.
need to be able to access you. Put the parental, barriers on that and whatnot. I mean, am I sounding like I'm an alarmist? I don't know. But I've heard so many things, and I have nieces and nephews that I'm very protective of. So
Yeah.
I'm like, no, you need to make sure that they have some way to contact you. Make sure that they are always contactable.
Yeah.
Because there were things, when I was growing up, there were things that happened. Nobody even realized they were happening because there was just no way to check. There was no there, the
Right.
social media wasn't there, the internet wasn't there. There was no way to know that the person next door was, a convicted
Right.
who knows what.
Right, right,
So
exactly. Yeah. So if there is that you're using social media, if you are using social media to meet others, I definitely think that as a parent you should be present, right? So it should be kind
absolutely.
of like a group thing. If
Hmm.
they have a daughter that's the same age as your daughter, or son and a son, so it's something that of course you should get to know, but at least that will like open a door to have a conversation. Oh, how long have you been homeschooling for?
Hmm.
Oh, what church do you go to? Do you guys have a youth group there? And I think that you pray about it, but I really think that God will help you to discern if there is something that doesn't fit right, or
Yeah.
if they're saying something that doesn't match up, something where you set it up like, oh, okay, yeah, let's have them meet at the coffee shop right next, we'll be at one table and they could be at the next table, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's at least at the beginning, right? Like you
Right.
said, you have to know who those people are,
Hmm.
and you usually see that over time. And it's just asking for God's wisdom and discernment, because
Hmm.
even when you think they're okay, sometimes they're not okay. So
Yeah.
it's you just have to do your best and ask God to not, for discernment and wisdom, and to not live in fear. But being in His Word and the Holy Spirit will help us to do that,
Hmm.
because on our
Yeah.
own we are not capable
Right.
of doing that. That's for sure.
Absolutely. I think of the scripture that says, if you want to have friends, you have to be friendly. That's my
Yeah.
revision of it. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that is a really important thing. When we were young, one of the things that we would do regularly, and not even all that young, is, we'd make cookies. And I don't know if you can do this anymore because of, health, reasons or
Yeah.
whatnot, but you can do things like, the holidays are coming up. Why not make little wreaths and bring them to your neighbors, especially
Hmm.
elderly neighbors? They would love that. And there may be the no contact thing. Be very careful about that because, there's masks do not protect you. And so
Hmm.
don't think that masks are going to protect you. Don't
Yeah.
go, walking around the neighborhood, in contact with everybody, and then go to the elderly person's house with a mask and think that's going to protect you.
Right.
I'm not a medical professional, but I can read the statistics and say that's the case. Be careful. You need to make sure that you're being aware of these things and you're being sensitive. But be willing to help somebody out. Go mow lawns. Go
Hmm.
do something in the community, because if you go and you reach out to people, people are going to start. You're going to find friends. The more
Right.
involved you are in things, you're going to find friends. Another thing that I really like is the idea of community involvement. There's so many groups that do things like, cleaning up a neighborhood, or um, even like packing up dinners for people that, maybe are having a hard time right now, especially during the COVID shutdowns and people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are coming back to work and they're doing pretty well. But in certain places, they're still somewhat shut down and they're still having a hard time. And so there's more and more people that are needing some help. So can you help with your church? Can you get together and your kids help with that? Can your kids help serve, in a soup kitchen or something like that? Can they
Yeah.
be involved in this kind of thing? Because when they're involved in that, there's other kids that are involved with that sort of thing too. And that's where they're finding people that are really at a higher caliber, not just necessarily wanting to be entertained and play. And that's great. The kids who are really involved in the and meeting high quality friends is important. And going back to that video I was talking about, this is an
Hmm.
accidental plug, but um, if you're going to get your kids involved in something like the debate club, that's a great way to meet friends, great way to develop really strong friendships, because they are in a supervised environment. The situation has already been vetted, generally speaking. These are people that have great reputations that have been doing this for many, many, many years. The leadership in that, and so it's very, very carefully structured so that, for the safety of the kids and for the to have a positive environment for them, and it's great opportunity. My brother was very involved in Bible quizzing, and he led the local Bible quizzing, and his daughter actually won nationals in
Oh, wow.
Bible quizzing. So my niece we were very proud of her.
Yeah.
She memorized a huge portion of the Bible, and just from memory. And so that
Right.
was one of those things, same sort of thing. And they would get kids involved, and some of the kids were not good, but they didn't care. They had fun. They went in and participated, and they had fun with the group. And it's a great skill to have. It really helps them academically, but it really helps them socially too. So get them involved in something. Get them involved in soccer. Get them involved in ballet. Get them involved
Right.
in music. Get them involved in, a writing club or something like that. And so really, the more you work with your kids and figure out what their interests are, you can actually help them develop relationships that are really centered in their actual interests, not just saying, oh, these are people that are their age, so they should hang out, because that doesn't necessarily make the best relationships.
Oh,
And who
yeah,
knows?
exactly. They might
They
be their parents. Sorry to interrupt
No,
you.
go ahead.
I was just going to say their parents may be teaching them something that is anti God's word, right? But they're
Hmm.
the same age. So, and also be prayerful. Maybe if your church doesn't have a big youth group, pray about it, and just say, because your kids growing is huge. And so
Hmm.
if the church does not have that, maybe look for a church, if you have the possibility to do so, that does have that. And so
Hmm.
I have heard of parents who have moved to different churches because of their children. Their children are the next generation, and they want to focus on their children as well as themselves. So
Hmm.
that's not like a main reason to move. It is, but it isn't. So obviously, just something to pray about. If
Yeah.
there, if you can't find that anywhere, and your child is, just struggling. I
Hmm.
think that's very. And then, real quick, a verse that popped up was Proverbs 12:26. So the righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way
Hmm.
of the wicked leads them astray. And so
Yes.
it's it can seem very simple, like, oh, you guys are the same age. Oh, they're pretty good people overall. It should be fine. But you don't know. Maybe that 13-year-old has an older brother who's teaching him how to steal, or teaching
Hmm.
him, how to speak, that using words that aren't great words.
Hmm.
So you just don't know. And so it's just important to try and keep them with other Christians as well. And even if you say you're a
Yes.
Christian, doesn't necessarily mean that you are living that out, but
Right.
to just ask God for discernment in regards to all that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because if you look at the kids who had the most potential that then fell and kind of destroyed their lives, and I mean, you hear these stories all the time.
Yeah.
You hear people, even people just shot because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Right.
because they were hanging out with the people that they shouldn't have. And it's not always that case. Sometimes it's
Right.
just, completely innocent people just going about their business. But, the majority of the time when something goes really bad, or, somebody gets arrested because they just happened to be with their friends when their friends were doing something that they didn't realize, or,
Right.
they start to smoke a little this or a little bit of that, and drink a little bit of this, a little of that, and you don't realize. And friends can be the best thing for your kids, and they can be the worst thing for your kids. So
Hmm.
be involved with their friends. And I don't know when we stopped being involved with friends as adults, stop worrying about who the kids' friends were, but we need to really be aware. You need to know their parents. You need
Right.
to know the parents of your kids' friends. If you don't, especially as they're younger, I mean, when they're older too, it's just harder when they're older. But when they're younger, if you know the parents when you're younger, you're going to have a lot more trust. You're going to know what's going on. It's going to be a lot easier, and hopefully those are the relationships that will grow and continue to flourish. And when you're talking about the moving a church for a youth group, another option is to combine youth groups. I've heard of churches
Hmm.
that have combined youth groups.
Right.
Go ahead and do that. So if there's two small churches that don't
Right.
necessarily have active youth groups, put them together. Why
Hmm.
not? If you share your general theology, it's
Yeah.
not, you may as well you get
Hmm.
kind of double your efforts there. And it might be that as the parent, you need to be the youth leader or one of the youth leaders to help kind of grow this thing and help move it along. And then you get to kind of be there and keep track of things and see what's going on. So
Mhm.
get your kids involved. Make sure that whatever they're involved with, it is a vetted leadership, or you personally know the leadership.
Mhm.
Don't just send them with a new group just because it sounds like a great thing. You know, make sure you keep an eye on it.
Right.
And then pray for them, because you
Yeah.
never know. You just literally never know, and they are precious. But you got to let them, you got to let them wander away from the nest a little bit and then call them back
Yeah.
so that they can grow. So,
Yeah.
one last quick question. Let's see if we can answer this in 2 minutes. How do we motivate students? That's like a whole hour session. But do you have any advice on motivating students?
Mm, I think I mentioned this in one of our previous videos, but I think what's worked for me and my nephews and is just looking at what their interests are. What do they enjoy
Yes.
doing? What do they naturally, lean towards? Right. So
Mhm.
if it's hide and seek, if it's playing video games, if it's something rather than forcing them to do something they don't want to do, try and look at what they do like to do, and then add on to that, or try to get okay, 10 minutes of playing video games and then 5 minutes of playing this other game, right? That makes them think about things that with purpose and things that matter. And then 10 minutes again, so they get a reward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And using what they're doing already, if they're playing a certain video game,
Right.
do the work and find the questions that you can ask them to make them develop these critical thinking, or
Mhm.
understanding, well, who made this game? Why did they make this game? Where did it come from? What were the first video games? If they're really
Mhm.
involved in that sort of thing, you may as well.
Right.
There's so many things that kids are interested in that will just naturally lead them to the path of education. I mean, because it is a kid's natural instinct to be educated, to learn.
Right.
That's why they ask why all the time, because they want to know those things. So absolutely, I think that using what their existing interests are is the best foundation of that. Do not
Yeah.
try to force them into something that they can't grasp, or they're not interested. Or if they're completely blocking it out and say, I do not want to learn this, let it go. For the time being, let it go. Sometimes you got to pick your battles. And
Yeah.
that's not always. Sometimes you have to make a way of doing that. But I think that my advice on top of that would be shorten your sessions. Make your
Mhm.
sessions 10 minutes instead of an hour. That might
Yeah.
seem extreme, but you will learn more in a well-focused 10
Yeah.
minutes that then ends up with, okay, after we do these 10 minutes and after you really give me 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it is of focused learning, then we're going to go do something fun. You're going to
Mhm.
get more productivity in those 10 minutes than you will in an hour of them just hating what they're talking about. So if it's something they really have to do, like math, and they really don't want to do it, just say, okay, well, we're going to sit down for 10 minutes. I'm going to work with you on these problems. And then once we, you know, get through whatever it is, we're going to set a timer. We're going to do as many as we can for 10 minutes, maybe make it a contest, make it a game. And then once it's done, we're going to go and do whatever it is that they like to do, right? Watch your
Right.
show or do something like that. And then it can become a kind of a game, make it a competition, but also because it's a short time, generally you've had success.
Yeah.
Because if it's a short period of time, you're picking things that you already kind of know, that your student already kind of knows, your child already knows, and they're gonna have more success with it. So they're going to leave that going, oh, I did kind of okay. And
Right.
they're not going to come back going, oh, it was horrible last time and I couldn't understand it and it was awful and it was this. No, they're going to leave on a high note. So then they're going to come back with a little bit more motivation next time, we hope. So, all right,
Yes.
excellent. I think that leaves people with a little bit of insight. I think we'll actually address this in length in our next session. I think it'll
Yes.
be an interesting topic to talk about how to motivate your students in different environments and different settings and different topics in different subjects. So at different ages. So
Yes.
thank you, Christina. It was great having you again with us, and we'll see you again in the not too distant future, and we'll see all of our viewers as well. So have a
Yes.
good day.
Thank you, Priscilla. You too. See you soon.